Detail to us, how do you think this is going to, what's going to be added onto Common Core in the next few years? It's just going to keep morphing and transforming and ultimately just dumbing down the kids even further. I mean, where's this going, Alex?
That's exactly what's going to happen, Henrik. And I mean, the starting point is bad enough. I can give some detail just as one piece of evidence that I think is, enough evidence just to prove how terrible these are. The Common Core people, Achieve Inc. and some of these other front groups that put this together, they put together a quote unquote validation committee. So this was supposed to be kind of a rubber stamp thing. They were going to look at the standards and approve and say how great they were. They put 2 subject matter experts on this committee, only 2, one for English, one for math. The English expert, Dr. Sandra Stotsky, refused to sign off. She said, no way, this is going to reduce the critical thinking abilities of children. We're removing, all the great works of literature and all the classics and all the, great pieces of fiction that have come down through hundreds of years. The heritage of humanity and the heritage of the West.
Yeah.
We're going to remove all that. And instead, we're going to read executive orders by Obama, and we're going to read, regulations from the EPA about how much insulation you need in your roof. And then we're going to see if we can follow instructions properly and decipher what we need to do based on it. I'm absolutely serious that this is what's going on. So Dr. Sandra Stotsky, and she doesn't oppose national standards. I oppose them in principle. They're not constitutional. They're a terrible idea. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. So, I oppose them on principle. She doesn't. She thinks national standards would be fine, but she said, no, these standards are terrible. I cannot possibly give, my seal of approval to this lunacy. And then in the math section, we had Dr. James Milligram from Stanford, mathematician, and he refused to sign off. He said, nope, these standards are very, very poor quality. The methodologies are just, a lot of them don't even make any sense. And some of these standards, believe it or not, this is amazing, are based on incorrect math. Anybody can go read his letter on why he refused to sign off. So basically, every government school in America, even in the few states that didn't adopt Common Core, the Common Core is coming in through the back door there too, they're going to be using incorrect math to teach your kids how to do math. So if you wonder why you can't help your kids with your homework, there's a good place to start looking.
Is that why they're doing it? Reforming it in such a way so that the parents kind of they disconnect the child from the parent. Consequently, they can't help them. Consequently, the child only can go to the the school to get the education about these issues. Because I mean, it's the way they're reforming these systems are like completely illogical. It doesn't make sense. It's going to just continue to plummet. I mean, look at the SAT scores. They're going down and down and down all the time, and they have to at some stage saying, okay. Whatever we're doing here, it's wrong. We need to try something else. But it's like that doesn't seem to happen. They just continue to push this very bizarre system on our kids,
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Henrik. I think that's one of the really big reasons here is they want to continue to grow the chasm between parents and children. I heard a school administrator not long ago in a news conference saying that the schools are now co-parents. Even in Sweden, I think that would probably be a pretty radical idea that the schools are the co-parents. But what they want to do is make it, impossible for parents to help their kids with their homework. They want to use these faulty methodologies that they know are quackery because it reduces critical thinking abilities. It reduces the ability of children to think independently and to sort through problems and come up with solutions. George Orwell, he talked a lot about, we need to use language in a way that makes it impossible for people to even think about questioning all this stuff. And, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the dumbing down, and there's a lot of purposes to it. But one of them is absolutely to further usurp the role of parents into the hands of the state. And, Sweden is further along in that respect than the United States. But the whole world is moving in that direction. In the UN Declaration on Human Rights, which is a terrible document, I would never, suggest that governments live by this. But they said, parents have a prior right to choose the education of their children. This is not, the role of government. And they said that because of the horrors that we know are produced when government takes control over the educational system. We see it today in communist China. We saw it in the Soviet Union. Kids just get brainwashed, and then horrible things become much easier and much more plausible when you don't have critical thinkers who can say, wait a minute here, I'm not sure, starting these wars or putting people in camps or, these kinds of things actually make sense. So, it's very, very troubling where this is all going.
You remember I was at the MSNBC host, Melissa Harris Perry, talked about how your kids doesn't really belong to you. They're kind of all of us now. It's all of our responsibilities, and it's very. I'm shocked to see that on American TV. It's amazing how quickly it's gone in America.
Yeah, the MSNBC clip, I think, was really a wake-up call for a lot of people. That ended up getting a good amount of attention, as it should have, because, this is essentially the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, telling us that our kids don't belong to us, they belong to the community. That's a terrible idea from, every possible angle you could think of. And we know, tragedy of the commons, when things don't belong, or when things belong to everyone, nobody actually takes care of them and they get destroyed. But, from a more fundamental perspective, parents really have the responsibility over children, and it's such a strong bulwark against bad things happening. When you have a central authority controlling everything that people learn, it becomes much easier to do mischief. Whereas if you have, a few parents who maybe don't educate their kids as well as they should, or maybe have, some weird ideas, that's not going to affect the whole society. But when you put it all in, one pair of hands, you centralize it like that, the possibilities for tragedy, multiply exponentially.
So it's really the end of civilization as we know it. If this continues, might sound kind of to jump far ahead in a kind of an extreme position. But the question is, unless they have a backup plan of how they're intending to run the governmental systems in the future, or even I don't know, at the workplace. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're contemplating, kind of swapping us out for, automated robots or something that are doing the base work. I don't know, but if they don't, I think we can just look around already, Alex, and just realize that things are, quality is getting worse. People are getting more and more stupid all the time. We're not spending our time, exploring space or like thinking about the deeper questions anymore. We are tending to all the minute, smallest details possible about carrying the weight of the rest of the world on our shoulders, at least in the West, for example. And we're not really getting anywhere. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they're out-phasing us. What do you think?
It absolutely is the point. And the end of civilization, I think, is a good way to put it. I mean, our civilization is based on things like the family unit and, things like that. And they're undermining that at breakneck speed. They have a drastically different idea of civilization in mind than anything that would even look remotely familiar to somebody who's versed in, the history of the West, the culture of the West. They're breaking down families, and the schools is a big part of that. Going back to the co-parenting by the schools, they all know, obviously, that central planning doesn't work. We've had plenty of examples of that. We still have some: Cuba, North Korea, Zimbabwe. I mean, you want to see misery and poverty and starvation, just go to a centrally planned economy, and you'll see it up close and personal. But I think one of the things that these utopians have in mind, and they've been pretty explicit about this as well. The UNESCO has been promoting it. They say we need more of this because this is so great. The Obama administration has been promoting this openly. They talk about the cradle to career education agenda. So one of the things that they're doing is compiling dossiers on every single student that's going through this system. And Common Core is a big part of this, but it existed before. It's just much more massive now. And they think that by gathering all of this information on each child, their academic levels, their beliefs, their behavior, their philosophical underpinnings, their family background, their IQ, their test scores, they think that by putting all this together, their computers are going to help them become better central planners, right? So they're going to start, assigning people to different tasks and putting people on, you'll be on track to be a mechanic, and maybe, you're doing pretty good. Maybe you can be, something a little better. So I think they think that their computers and their data gathering and their data mining might help in making central planning slightly more efficient and maybe more effective. But that would be assuming that they were benevolent. I think that would be a very bad assumption to make.
So communism won the Second World War. And if we look at the ideological people even behind America, the Allies at the time, from FDR, who had his good friend Uncle Joe, Joseph Stalin, to many of those who later kind of infested the Department of Treasury, for example, like Harry Dexter White and some of these people, Keynes. They were really on an ideological basis very much inclined with socialist communist ideas. And then, of course, later in America, you had a reemergence in the 60s of cultural Marxism through the Frankfurt School. And this is really the ideology that has permeated the world now. And I think we're really seeing the fruits of this And I still don't think many people kind of understand that aspect of it. They think, human rights, they think freedom and, democracy for all. And these can't possibly be tyrannical system. But the reality is they are. And the reality is that they are based in old, standard textbook communist, kind of ideas. But the bottom line is it's also been reformed over the years, Alex. So it's not, on par on every single aspect. Even today, I think that full-on communism in certain aspect would be too radical, too traditional, actually. What we have today is kind of a merger of this that's created a kind of a progressivism that is absolutely horrific in its tyrannical implications. And furthermore, why it's so dangerous is that people don't have that perception about it. They think that it's there to take care of all of us and it's going to make things better. I guess it is going to take care of us, isn't it?
You're so right about this, Henry. I mean, when I hear people say that, communism died and stuff, I just want to rip my hair out. You couldn't be more wrong. Communism didn't die. It never went away. It was never some kind of benign idea that just didn't work out so well. It was a diabolical plan to enslave humanity, and it never went anywhere. The collapse of the Soviet Union, people said, hooray, we don't have to worry about communism anymore, without even realizing, just read the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. If you live in any society in the West, I guarantee you they'll sound familiar. Graduated progressive income tax, government schools for all the children, central bank with monopoly on currency and credit. It's all there. Communism didn't go anywhere. The communists were not punished after, the collapse of the Berlin Wall. The communists from the start were built up by establishment forces in the West, and even Stalin. I mean, you mentioned, FDR and Uncle Joe. People forget about that. The United States and criminals in our government, and some of them were actual Soviet agents and Soviet spies who were convicted and in some cases executed. But they were building up the Soviet war machine. They built the factories of the Soviet Union. They built the factories that built the tanks of the Soviet Union. And the collapse of the Soviet Union is interesting. People think that meant the end of communism. I beg to differ. First of all, the biggest country in the world, 1.3 billion people, is currently enslaved by a communist party dictatorship. And people say that's not communism. They have a little bit of free market now. No, they don't really. They have a little bit of the appearance of that because they've allowed private investors to buy into these government-owned companies and so on. But the socialist, communist, totalitarian ideology has always been there, and it's never been an end in and of itself. The people who were promoting this kind of stuff, other than the useful idiots, as Lenin called them, they didn't really believe that we were going to have some kind of wonderful brotherhood of man if we just got rid of private property and individual liberty. This was a diabolical conspiracy to enslave and plunder and pillage their fellow human beings. And, I know it's a little bit off the subject, but there's some excellent books out there by Anatoly Golitsyn. He was a high-level operative in the KGB disinformation department, and he made a number of predictions. He published his books in the 80s. He came over to the West and defected, and he outlined what they were going to do. He said, first, they're going to liberalize Eastern Europe. It's going to be a fake liberalization. Don't believe it. Then maybe even the Soviet Union is going to come down. But don't believe it. They have plans for, a second revolution, and they want to impose world communism. Now, is communism the end and be all of the threat? Absolutely not. But it is a crucial tool of the people who want to run the world for nefarious purposes.
Yep, many people have said it. Even Vladimir Bukovsky spoke out a few years ago now, talking about how the European Union is formulating into kind of a new Soviet dictatorship, and it's really happening. Okay, sure, there's on a material level, yet it's not as bad, but on a what do you call it, philosophical level, I guess, on a political level, it definitely is. And look at, for example, political correctness. Look at how they're clamping down on free speech. This comes through the back door usually now these days of self-censorship, for example, and these are. This is just a different approach to making, having the same goal achieved, basically, isn't it, Alex?